Welcome and welcome back to everyone joining us on Rooted to Thrive Conversations that Elevate Our Humanity podcast. I'm Professor P, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari. And today we have Dr. Timberly Baker, who is an associate professor at Arkansas State University and an educational consultant at Equity Educators. Dr. Baker is not only an international speaker on school choice and Black education in the American South, but she is a roller skater, avid. Listen, y'all. Roll, bounce, right? Okay, so some people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I first met Dr. Baker Timberly
hmm
when she was on the leadership team for an organization that we both belonged to. And I was a new member at the time. I'm not sure if she knew that I was a new
I
member.
didn't.
Yeah, I jumped right in onto a conference development
Mhm.
team. And she struck me as so down to earth and forward thinking. Like in the midst of, I would say in communities, I've been in communities where a lot of people are, really pointing out the problem.
Mhm.
I saw Dr. Baker actually talking about what's possible. I saw someone who rolled up her sleeves, got in the trenches with the community, and had vision for what was possible. She helped the organization feel like home for me from the start. So I am so honored to have this conversation with you. How are you doing today?
I am well, and even better after that introduction. I'm like, oh, wow,
Yeah,
was that me she's talking about? Yes.
that's
So,
you.
no, I'm
Yeah.
doing well.
And
Yeah.
as they say,
Thank you.
you are who you are everywhere you go. So now you know.
Yeah.
Now you
Well,
know.
good.
So
Yes.
I'm so excited to have you speak on the topic today, like really supporting parental dignity,
hmm
right? Supporting
hmm
parental dignity in our schools and partnering with them for solutions and not conflict. So I'm curious, before we get deep down into that, what came to your mind when you heard the title of this podcast, Rooted to Thrive, Conversations that Elevate Our Humanity?
Yeah. I was intrigued, right? I think humanity is such a critical thing to really not just think about, but enact for us and how we move in community with one another, in spaces that we frequent often and those that we don't. And the idea of being rooted in that space of humanity, being so valuable to the success of or the thriving of ourselves individually and then also the community, right? Because when I individually am rooted to thrive, right, then I can pour into other people. And so I think that's what came to mind is that this is an opportunity that you are providing a consistent opportunity to pour into others and into our humanity from a place where you are rooted so that you thrive so that others will too.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, we are trying our best, our very best. And
Yeah.
so, if you would just share a little bit about your background. Who is Timberly Baker?
Yeah. So oh, what are all the things? I'm like, when I looked at this, I'm like, where do I start, right? So Timberly Baker is a mother and a scholar. I also am a community member. I'm a daughter and a friend. I see myself in sort of all of those capacities all at once, which sometimes is challenging depending on the context that I'm in. Um, in terms of my background in coming to this work, I've had several experiences. One of the ones that is most, I would say, potent or relevant to the topic that we have today is that when I was in my doctoral program, my nephew was expelled from school, and he was in the eighth grade, and he was expelled for a fight, and it was the first time he had ever gotten in trouble, and they expelled him, and to be direct, baby, I was hot. And I
Mhm.
was so frustrated and irritated because I didn't know what to do and I didn't know how to help my sister at the time to navigate all the things. And that was just really unfortunate. And so I think that was one of the things that really made the pursuit of really understanding disciplinary outcomes and how they impacted African American communities explicitly, very much a part of what I had going on. And so, yeah, that was probably the major stepping stone that brought me into that. And I was in my doc program, and I'm like, I'm learning all this good stuff. Like, surely I should be able to help or do something about it. And I really felt helpless and powerless in that moment. And so I was like, I'm gonna figure this out.
All right.
I'm gonna do something about this. And so
That's
that's really
excellent.
what drove it.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. And so it's interesting that you said your nephew was expelled. It
Hmm.
was for a fight, and I'm sure
Hmm.
that was some zero tolerance policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so whether you were the target of it, the perpetrator, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter.
All the things. Right.
Right. And then the outcome is he's expelled. He has this on his
Hmm.
record,
Right.
and it's the first time he got in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very at least to me, it was odd at the time for that type of response
Mm,
to a student who hadn't had any type of prior anything, you know? And so I think that was the thing that was most baffling to me was that their choice to expel him. And in that, though, you know, schools are still responsible for your educability. And so they then remanded. So what I did help her do was get him um, placed placed in the alternative school for the district. But then he got enrolled in the alternative school and they were out of slots.
oh,
So they were
what?
homebounding everybody from the alternative school to home. And that wasn't a viable option for my sister.
Right.
And it just snowballed in a lot of ways after that.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Well, now
Hmm.
your research actually took you to looking at parents and
Hmm.
yeah, and these disciplinary practices and interaction with schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the one I want to highlight today in our thinking and
Mm-hmm.
discussion is
Mm-hmm.
in this book. It's called Critical Analysis of Parental Involvement in Schools. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a book chapter that's titled Parents Need to Know Their Rights. And what it really, what our goal was in this particular piece was to highlight some of the experiences that African American parents were having in this particular location where the study takes place, and we took on this question of what does navigating racial healing practices look like for an
Mm-hmm.
African American community when healing from injustice perpetrated on them by the school community in relation to the school prison nexus and the criminalization of African American youth. And so, from a place of real challenge,
Yeah.
for lack of a better description. We really wanted to hear from parents because we often start these conversations about discipline from the perspective of the school rather than the
Mm-hmm.
perspective of the families.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what does it mean to have to send your child back to school after the school has been like, we don't want them here?
Right. Right.
You know, so like, what does that mean for the parents? What does that mean for the school community? How do we support each other? These are all the sort of things that we were trying to get at around this navigating racial healing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, and so ultimately what we found was that there were these three different areas that parents really felt like were troubling them in terms of the school and the response that the school gave. And it
Okay.
came out of people talking about, we asked them, please share about your children's learning experiences in school.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, what followed was not what we, I think, went into it expecting to hear, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But many Black parents began to discuss what is that it's all about who comes around. And so this idea that if you aren't present or if you don't come around or if you're not at the school when they think you should be, then you don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then that parents need to know their rights, which is the title of the
Mhm.
paper, because that came out a lot around how we understood what it meant to um, have a child suspended or expelled or whatever. And then what is your right in relationship to restoration to the
Mhm.
schooling space? And what is your right even in the disciplinary process in the first place? And so it's informed quite a bit of work that I've done in community. And then as a result of that, I don't know if I'm going into your other questions, but
That's
as
okay.
a result of that, it moved myself and one of my research partners to construct this um, community engaged research project that we had for five
Mhm.
years
Mhm.
that was called And How Are the Children? And it's an African proverb that you ask, and how are the children? And the hopeful response is the children are well. But in this particular context, the children aren't well if we're dealing with the school to prison nexus. And so it became our shared mission in community with others to begin to develop these spaces and places where we could have these very integral conversations about what do I do or how do I respond or how do I understand these disciplinary outcomes or these situations that are happening. How do I understand when people are talking about how bad this school is, and what they're saying is that the black bodies that inhabit this school are problematic, right? But that's
Mhm.
not the language that they use to describe it. And then how do I maintain my own humanity within all of this frustration and irritation and trying to love my child and be present for them? And so that was all sort of wrapped up in our work around And How Are the Children?
Yeah, I love it. How are the children? The children are not well.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what do we do when that's the answer?
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I
Mhm.
think for our engagement in our humanity is that we have to come together in community and have some
Yes.
real strong and valuable conversations, support, advocacy,
Mhm.
partnership.
Mhm.
And those are the things that came out of it, right? Is some parents partnering with others,
Mhm.
some school principals that weren't principals at these particular schools, right?
Mhm.
Showing up and saying, here's an approach to maybe navigate this that may be more palatable within the system than the
Mhm.
approach that you've maybe previously taken. And
Yeah.
so we can do that in community, right? Sort of on the outside of the schooling space that might not be able to occur internal to the schooling space.
So, unlike what I typically hear, right, is to band with other parents, I'm hearing you
Hmm.
say, yeah, utilize your resources to get to other people who think like the administrators at the school.
Yes.
There are 6 degrees of separation between all of
Hmm.
us, for sure.
Hmm.
And in some areas of the country, I say two, right? And here in
Right.
Philadelphia, it's only 2 degrees of
Really?
separation. I kid you not. And I'm not even
Hmm.
from here.
Oh.
And I feel like after 30
Hmm.
years having been here, that there are just 2 degrees. There's somebody who knows
Yeah.
somebody who is a principal, or you
Hmm.
have a family member that had a child at another school with a different principal. Get that person's perspective, someone that you
Right.
trust, right?
Yeah.
That's one of your community resources. I love that.
Absolutely.
I-
Absolutely.
um,
And I think it was really important because sometimes we take those roles, like the person
mhm,
and the role, and we're not able to see them as separate from that role, depending on what's going on. And they may not be able to operate like that, of course, in the school building, right? And so these
mhm,
community conversations were happening at different, mostly local churches and the library, which is who we
okay,
had partnership with.
mhm,
Um, and so, because that, it put this barrier between the school space itself and the way you are supposed to operate, right?
mhm.
And being a community member and providing
Yes.
opportunities for you to just be a community member that has this school knowledge versus being a principal that's at a
Mhm.
community meeting.
Right. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
very different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And so you're using other resources like community spaces,
Hmm.
right? So we're using
Yes.
community spaces, and I don't want the listeners to miss this, right? So Dr. Timberly Baker, right, is a
Yes.
scholar, is a researcher who is
Hmm.
also a mother, a daughter,
Yes.
a community member. And so
Hmm.
whatever you think about the academy, okay, I have, some things to say too after 38
Uh,
years. But however, your like the image that one might have, right, of the scholar coming in
yes.
and telling everybody what to do is not who actually would be on this podcast, just so you know.
Yeah.
But that there are scholars who understand that the
Hmm.
people have the knowledge that they
Absolutely.
that they need. And we do some work in different worlds, right? Like in different spaces to look at patterns, to see,
Hmm.
right, to elevate it beyond our individual experiences, to inform this kind of work, to tease out
Hmm.
where there are patterns like
Yes, absolutely.
children getting put out and then you trying to get them back into a place that
Hmm.
doesn't want them,
Hmm.
right? So there are many scholar activists out there, and you're looking at one of them. And I would say that
Thank
every
you.
scholar who has been on here has been one of them. Yes,
Hmm.
that like don't think that it's a us and them, despite what
Right.
institutionally you have felt. You have resources
Absolutely.
in your local colleges. There's at least one of us on every campus.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was really important when because, so let me back up a couple of
Mhm.
years from the work I was just talking about, is that a piece of how this got started was that I was actually commissioned, so hired as a consultant, to do a data analysis on the school system. And I got the data from the school. Like I was working with the school district to get the data from them. And so I wrote this report, and then I did a community. Part of my agreement for doing the work was that I would do this community meeting where I delivered this information directly to the community instead of just to the school district. And it was in a church basement.
Mhm.
Very, very like let's have some cookies and punch, and
Yes.
right. So and so I did this presentation, and local news showed up, and it was a great experience. But one of the things that I said coming out of that was that, like, what I bring to this work is the data analysis. It was a quantitative analysis, is the statistical analysis on this work.
Mhm.
But if we are to continue this work, it's going to take all of us. Like
All
I,
of them.
I cannot be the face of this
Hmm.
because I also don't have the lived experience of it. And that was really
Right.
important, was that I am a mother, but neither one of my children have ever been suspended or expelled from school.
Okay.
And so it was really important that while I'm steeped in the data and the research and all of that,
Mhm.
that I don't make me the expert on this because of that.
Mhm.
Rather, we share the expertise in this experience from different perspectives um, and ways, right? So I may have the data and literature expertise, but there's parents that were sitting before me that, like, you have the lived experience
Mhm.
expertise. And
Mhm.
while I've learned a lot of that coming along this process, I started off talking about my nephew, to be the actual mother of a child who has been, dismissed from the school, and then it's supposed to show back up. I don't have that lived experience. And so I think also
Mhm.
as researchers, we have to make space for, and again, in our humanity, to decenter ourselves and recognize other people's expertise and how we complement that, but that we don't need to take it over, right? Like it's
Yes.
not just my burden to bear. And it's also not always just my story to tell either. And
Right.
so I think that's the other really important piece, is how do we make space for the lived expertise
That's right. Right.
of the
It
folks who
is.
we work with.
That's right. It is the
Mhm.
expertise. As I heard someone else say recently, we are the experts on our own lived experience. Like there's
Mhm.
that's a fact.
Yep.
And it's time for everyone to acknowledge that. Everyone,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you know,
And I think when we
right.
talk about being rooted to thrive, that's
Mhm.
one way we can do it, right? Is to say, this is what I'm thinking. Here's my experience and here's my perspective. But what is yours? And let me really listen to what that is
Mm,
and what that means and how it has value to to me and for me, but then also to you and for you.
yes. Oh my goodness. You are singing my song. Okay. You are singing my song. So many years, right, of
Mhm.
just doing this work and listening is a skill that many of us need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was just explaining to my daughter. So I have a 15 and a 17-year-old, so pray for me. But anyway, um, but I was just explaining to my oldest last week. Yeah, last week, I
Mhm.
was telling her about how I had to learn to listen to understand, not just listen to respond.
Exactly.
And the real clarity behind the distinction between the two, right? As to listening to say, oh, yeah, 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 this is what I think, or, this is what I heard, versus listening to say, oh, this is what I now understand as a result of what you said. And I don't have to respond to it. I'm just taking it in
Mm-hmm.
for learning, for knowledge, for understanding. And
Mm.
that might be in learning an individual person or just learning about a thing, right? But that difference in how you listen. And I think that's one of those practical steps that we have to take in our pursuit of greater humanity is that
Yes.
distinction.
Yes, indeed. And I'm gonna challenge especially our educators
Hmm.
around that, right? A scenario that just popped in my mind. I might have mentioned this on another episode, but it has really driven the urgency I feel in this season of my life uh, when it comes to working with educators. Um, Picture the scene, first grade classroom, little boy whose name I know because as a visitor, once every 2 weeks, his name
Hmm.
is called,
Gotcha.
not for positive reasons. And in this particular day is not sitting still. And I'm in a context with pre-service teachers there
Hmm.
to observe, and the pre-service teacher is standing over him, like telling him to get off the carpet where they all were sitting to move to the red chair, right? Whatever.
Hmm.
It was just a chair that was nearby, but it
Hmm.
it was red.
Yeah.
And the little boy just wouldn't move.
Hmm.
Turned to the teacher. I said, "Hey, how do you redirect him?" She says, I ignore him. I'm open to whatever, you would recommend. First of all, my heart dropped when she said I ignore
Yeah.
him.
Hmm.
Yes, and then and y'all just remember I've never been a pre-K to 12 teacher,
Right.
okay? But what I do know, ignoring is not an option, right? Like I think I heard it as a parent. I heard it as a
Hmm.
grandparent,
Hmm.
right? And so without a mentor, right? These people are in the room trying to learn to be a teacher. Without a
Right.
mentor who has an effective strategy for movement, I don't know, something just came over me. I got up, I walked over to the little boy, I crouched down, right? I'm not standing over
Hmm.
him. And I said, "What's wrong?" Nobody thought to ask him what was wrong
Right.
except
Yeah.
me.
Hmm.
And I racked my brain, like, what is so different about me in this situation, right?
Yeah.
It's because I see a human being versus I prioritize the human being. I'm not saying they don't see a human being, but I
Right.
prioritize the human being over getting this lesson done, right? Because the lesson's still not getting done
Right.
because
That's
you're
true.
just
That's
focusing
true.
on him.
Hmm.
And other little kids actually mentioned it later. That's a whole nother story. Like they felt like I didn't understand what was going on because I was distracted by that,
Hmm.
right? So this little boy, though, says to me, he finally, I got him off the rug. He finally says to me, I asked him what was wrong. He said, they didn't move me on the behavior chart, which is not
Yeah.
best practice.
Hmm.
Okay. This wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And it's not, it's post-pandemic, by the way. Okay. COVID-19 pandemic for our
Hmm.
listeners. And he said they didn't move me from red to green. I did what they told me to do, and they didn't move me from red to green,
Hmm.
right? Go to the teacher. He said that nobody moved him from red to green when he did what he was told to do. Yeah? Teacher
Hmm.
says, oh, he doesn't know the difference between 5 minutes and 5 hours. I thought, is this not a
He
first grade?
he
Wait a
clearly
minute.
does.
Wait, what? No, 5 minutes and 5 hours? What first grader does? What he does know is when he's doing something wrong, oh, he's on red real quick, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
First grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y'all, you need to hear that. That's just
Hmm.
how important this is. And every parent needs to hear this and listen with that lens to what Dr. Baker has to say. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Dr. Baker, tell us a little bit about their rights.
Yeah, so when we think about the rights of parents, especially in the point of advocacy for their students, one of the quotes in the study, I'm going to use somebody else's words to really highlight this instead of just
Okay.
my own. So one of our participants says, quote, I definitely believe there has to be something where parents know their rights. Parents need to know their rights. They have a right to look at grades. They have a right to ask questions about a test question, or they have a right to request a meeting. They have a right at the meeting in leaving after school. They have the right to make a meeting. They have the right to be there for everything that their student is dealing with. And in knowing their rights, parents are able to advocate for themselves, their children, and one another. And I thought that was really important that it was all of the above, right? Like the parent, the child, and one another,
Mhm.
to ensure that there's this quality education that the child is receiving. And so there are rights beyond what I just named, right? But I
Yes.
think it brings us into a really good space around talking about what it means for parents to come into a space to request a meeting, for one, because that was something
Okay.
that we dealt with quite a bit. And out of the data, some of the other pieces was about the experiences of coming into those meetings. And I want to talk about one for a little bit that's unfortunately very common,
Mm.
especially in the experience of Black mothers. And
Okay.
that is the school's intent to intimidate the parent. And this came out in looking like, and if you've ever had one of these experiences, because I've been there and done it,
Mm-hmm.
mine wasn't about discipline, but it was still the same concept around intimidation,
Mm.
where you think you're going to meet with the teacher and you get there and it's the teacher, it's the principal, it's the counselor, there's all
Mm.
these other adult bodies that may be present, that are none of the people you asked for.
Mhm.
But in that instead of their goal being partnership with you to ensure your child gets what they need, it's almost like just back down and leave it alone. We've already decided what we want to do with your child, and it's our decision. And so, one of the discussions we had around this particular piece around intimidation was having your own advocate, not going to
Mm.
these meetings by yourself either, because when you show up with somebody, it definitely changes the dynamic. And I've done the advocacy work with different families before, and as soon as you walk in and you're like, oh, they know who the parent is, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, who do you have with you? Oh, this is Dr. Baker. She's here with me to make sure that I understand what's happening and all of those types of things. Immediately it shifts that dynamic. And so
Mhm.
that intimidation piece was something
Mm.
that's common that happens, especially for, again, in the context that we were looking at was Black mothers. And just that presence of someone else was
Mhm.
very important to a shift in the ways that those conversations were approached. And then also using language, you have the right to partner with the school, but we have to unfortunately press partnership versus a one directional communication.
Mm-hmm.
that says to the school, or that comes from the school to you, as if you have no right to respond in any way that's counter to whatever it is that they have to say. And you
Mm-hmm.
do have the right to respond in a way that's counter, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we started, encouraging parents to say, if the school says we're going to suspend them for 10 days, tell them you understand that the behavior that they exhibited was not appropriate, right? Take ownership of that. But that, no, you're not suspending them for 10 days. It'll be 3, because I understand that a consequence needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you will not suspend my child for 10 days.
Right. The learning
And in
loss.
part, that's
Mm-hmm.
right. And in partnership, I'll support the 3 days, but I'm not supporting or agreeing to these 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And parents have the right to do that. Unfortunately, we don't know that. And so that was a big part of this work, was really starting to say, no, you can, and I don't want to say push back exactly, but you can provide an alternative recommendation to the school
Mm-hmm.
for what may be appropriate for your child, or for whatever it happens. And I'll give another quick anecdotal story from my own experience. So in 2018, my sister passed away, and at the time, my nephew was 15, and he came to live with me. And oh, the joys of having a 15-year-old boy! But he was getting in some trouble at school, which I'm like, he's grieving, like it's a lot happening, right? And he got in trouble this one day. And so they called me, and they were telling me they were going to suspend him for 5 days. And I did exactly what I just said. No, we're
Mm-hmm.
not doing that. I said, but what you can do is give him Saturday school for the next 3 weeks. I said, because I'm telling you now, Saturday school will change his behavior faster. Having to take his Saturday to come up
Mm-hmm.
there to the school to
Mm-hmm.
sit or do whatever the things are is going to change that behavior faster than you sending him to my house for
Right.
5 days, chilling
Right.
at the house,
Right.
right, where everybody
Right.
else is
It's
doing all
work.
the things that
Right.
we have to do, right? Like it's not, that's
Right.
not a, it's not a real punishment in the ways in which you may think. And it's
Mm.
not a consequence. It's just a removal for the
Huh?
school to say, well, we just need a break from him. And that's different than trying to actually change a student's behavior. And so when we think about really advocating for parents, with parents, again, tapping into our own humanity and that of our children, right? What's actually manageable and at capacity and within our capacity within our households as well, is to say, I honor that my child has done something wrong.
Mhm.
I
Acknowledge it.
acknowledge that, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, the consequence or the amount of time that you've given for that is not feasible or amenable within my
Mm-hmm.
context. And so I'm going to have to kindly regard, and in partnership, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
going to agree that they will not do 10 days at home.
Right. And that parent knows that child
Hmm.
in ways that maybe the school doesn't, and knows what the child responds to or not in
Right.
another context. So they are a necessary contributor.
They are. And unfortunately, too many schools don't see them as that.
Mm-hmm.
They see
Mm-hmm.
parents as a barrier to this outcome that they want, right? And this is where we get a lot of this language about these parents don't care, or they're not worried about their child. No, I say this every time I present on parental engagement things, is you are generally talking to, and there's the rare human being, back to our humanity, there's the rare human being who has birthed and or taken on responsibility of this person that does not care about them. That is not a truth. Just
Mm-hmm.
because this adult doesn't behave the way that you expect them to
Mm-hmm.
is not a demonstration of their lack of care for the child. And
Correct.
so I
Mm.
deeply care about this child. And I care about them so much that I'm not going to allow them to be removed from the school environment for 10 days.
That's right.
So we back to, but here's what we're going to do. And so part of
Mhm.
that advocacy and parents needing to know their rights is to be really clear about what's the outcome you want, and keep coming back to it, keep coming
Mm.
back to it, keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Because in the situation with my nephew, he got into some other little things or whatever, and I ended up meeting with the principal, and I told him, I said, look, I know you got like 695 kids to worry about. I get that. I said,
Mhm.
I got one,
Right.
right? And I'm trying to do my best by this one. So while you may have to take into account all of these, I'm trying to partner with you to
Mhm.
contribute to that in
Mhm.
terms of how to handle this one.
Mhm.
and you're not listening.
Mm.
So if you're not responding in the way that I think is going to be most helpful, so that you are actually changing the behavior that you're seeing from him, then do you actually want his behavior changed, or do you just want to remove him from the learning environment? And that's what I said.
Mhm.
And of course, no educator is going to be like, oh, I just want to remove from the learning environment, right? No, they're going to be like, no, 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 that's not, that's not it. That's, and it really
Right.
does shift the conversation when you begin to talk about it from
Mm.
that space
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
place. And what is the outcome we're really seeking?
And something that struck me was, yes, and I know they are also talking to Dr. Baker. And I also know that they are, because yeah, it's so interesting, right? When we drop the letters, there's a different response, right?
It is.
Right? Go ahead.
And I always go into those, even with my nephew and my children, when I've advocated for them, is I'm never Dr. Baker.
Mhm.
At least
Mhm.
not at the beginning.
Right,
I
right.
always try and yeah, I always try and go in as just mom. And I'll tell one other real quick anecdotal story that's related to parents knowing their rights.
Mhm.
So I think you're aware I homeschool my children now, or
Right.
my children have been homeschooled. They were in school at one point, and this
Hmm.
story is what got me into homeschooling them. But my oldest is gifted. She's a very fast learner. So
Hmm.
long story short, I was trying to advocate for her to get some different services from the school that she was attending at the time. And at this point, nobody knows I'm Dr. Baker, right? And
Hmm.
very intentionally. And so I asked to have this meeting, and I'm trying to, sort of advocate for my child to get what she needs. And in the process of the meeting, the curriculum director for the district, so side note, I know the parent engagements person personally for that district. And so she knew that I was Dr. Baker, but she also knew I was not trying to come into that meeting as Dr. Baker. The curriculum person didn't know this. And so very rudely, she says to me, I don't think you understand how curriculum works. And so what you're asking for is not something that we can do. And so
I
I look at
love where
the
this is going.
so I look at the parent engaging person, and she just goes like this.
I love it.
And so I let her finish, and then I said, let me reintroduce myself.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I said. I said, let me reintroduce myself. I came in this room as my child's mother to have a discussion with you, to advocate for her about what's going on. I said, but now you presented me with something as if I am unaware of what it is that you're talking about. And so then I sort of ran down some of my credentials, and I was like, so if we want to talk about what I know versus what you know, I've had a plethora of experiences in terms of curriculum and flexibility within the schooling environments because of the type of work that I do and been in a lot of
Hmm.
schools and all of that, right? So not only do I have ideas about what this could look like, but I've seen it in action in other places. And
Right.
you're limited by your scope because of where you are, but not
Right.
because of your possibilities. You can make this happen.
That's right.
Now, if you're choosing not to, that's something different.
Hmm.
And so she kind of, tried to backtrack and sputter and all these things. Um and so ultimately out of that meeting I said, you know what, they're not going to provide for my child what she needs, and so I'll homeschool. Then fast forward a semester later, this particular curriculum director applied to the program that I teach in the doctorate for, and was
Oh
in one of
no.
my classes.
Oh my. Okay. That's some interesting karma.
It was.
Yes.
It really
Yes.
was. But I also say that because we enter into these spaces, one, in
Hmm.
our humanity, and as a
Hmm.
parent, right, as someone
Hmm.
who's advocating for someone we deeply love.
Hmm.
Um, and we can come in community with people, but we do have to sometimes be responsive in ways that may seem petty, right? Let me
Hmm.
reintroduce myself. Um, for these spaces, and what I want for schools, still rooted in our humanity so that they can thrive too,
Hmm.
is for them to read this type of work and
Yes.
self check
Mhm.
around what are the practices that we have that might be doing this to parents in a way that we don't want that for this community of
That's
scholars. We don't
right.
want that for this community of families. And so that it can be beneficial both for parents in knowing their rights, but then also for schools in responding to what is happening, especially related to discipline.
That's right. And I had two thoughts of, well, when you were talking about the scene, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
with the principal for your nephew and for your daughter,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that came to mind was, okay, everybody isn't Dr. Baker, right? Like,
Right.
so, right, or Dr. somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and, with a background in education too, right? Like,
Right.
because you could be Dr. somebody and not know anything about
Mm-hmm.
educational spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
However, I was thinking about your sense of self-efficacy and confidence
Mm-hmm.
because you are a doctor, right? Because
Yep.
of the your areas of expertise. And the masses aren't, right?
Right.
Most people aren't.
It's true.
But what I wanted to point out is the level of emotional intelligence that was brought to the space because of your confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? You were able to think clearly. You were able to communicate clearly what you
Mm-hmm.
wanted. When all the fire it is, firing off in the backs of our
Mm-hmm.
brains, and we're ready to take off
Yep.
the earrings,
Right, right, yeah.
right? Or your tie,
Hmm.
whatever. It's hard to think and communicate clearly.
I agree. And I think some of the strategies and recommendations that I give to families, and I just did an advocacy meeting a couple of weeks ago for a student in special education,
Mm,
is to write down exactly what you want and have that with you so that you can keep coming back to it, even in those moments of when you're feeling exacerbated or frustrated or irritated or like,
mhm.
I'm not really sure what's happening, is to keep coming back to, okay, the purpose of this meeting today was to address A, B, and C.
Yes.
I feel like we've talked about A,
Mhm.
but we haven't gotten to B and C.
Mhm.
And so for the parent to keep bringing the conversation back to this piece, and that's one of those practical strategies that I'll give them, is to say, what is it exactly that you want? Like, what do you want for your child? Or what do you want for the conversation? Or, you know what I'm saying? Or what is the
Mhm.
outcome that you're seeking? Um, and then keep coming back to that, because you're right, not all of us have the capacity or ability to do that. The other part is what I said about bringing someone else along, and that doesn't have to be
That's
a
right.
Dr. Baker. That
Right.
person does not have to be a Dr. Baker. It does have to be someone, I would say, that's semi removed from the
Mhm.
situation,
Right.
that's able to help remind you, hey,
Mhm.
hey,
Mhm.
love,
Mhm.
don't forget about these three things.
That's
Like,
right.
don't let them get you off your game,
That's
right?
right. That's
We
right.
came in here for these three things. And so whatever that might or excuse me, whoever that might be for
Mhm.
you, whether that's a grandparent, or a
Mhm.
friend, or a community leader, or somebody else, that is able to do that for
For
you
you.
and
Yeah.
with you.
There are also
Hmm.
another set of ears, period.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Two of you hearing the same thing will help, right? You sort through it,
Hmm.
especially if one of you heard it differently,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
It's just extra support. And I'm glad you mentioned that. It's just so interesting that this conversation is happening on the heels of our family finding out that one of my grandkids is on the spectrum, the autism
Oh, hmm.
spectrum.
Yeah.
And the first advice I was given by a parent who had gone through this 20 years ago was, who happens to be a lawyer though,
Hmm.
immediately she was like, get this book on the law,
Hmm.
know your rights. That was the
Yep.
right.
Yep.
And another book around emotion, and it was called From Emotion to Advocacy.
Mm.
Right.
Oh, that's
And so,
good.
right. So
Yeah.
you're like
Yes. Yes.
demonstrating
Yeah.
exactly what she shared with
That's
us.
good. That's good.
And she
Yeah.
said, I said, listen, I was ready to fly to, the location. And
Hmm.
she said, oh no, just tell mom
Right.
that to tell the school that your support person needs to be zoomed in to every
Exactly.
meeting. I was like, all
Exactly.
right, we got it.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. And it because back to your point about self-efficacy is that the other
Hmm.
part of it is that when you have that other person, it helps with your own personal confidence in those moments
Yes.
as well, right?
Hmm.
And so your sense of efficacy related to being able to advocate for your child, even if I never say anything, right? Just the
Hmm.
presence of this other person. You know, I've been in meetings where I just sort of tap the piece of paper like, hey, don't feel I can see you, you know,
Right.
don't
Right.
forget what we came here for, right? I ain't gonna say
Right.
nothing, but and so that being a part of it, and it's back to the community piece. I just, we cannot do this life. I firmly
Mhm.
believe we cannot do this life outside of community.
No, we can't. Yeah, we need
And
each other. Mm.
absolutely, and the more we tap into that community, um, the benefits will come back to us in terms of what it
Mhm.
is. And one of the things that I've had to I would say challenge and encourage, because this is often something that I found in parents who are in lower income statuses as well,
Okay.
that feel very challenged by the school system, period,
Hmm.
as a whole, right?
Hmm.
For a lot of different reasons,
Right.
is to remember that the school is responsible to them also.
Right.
Sometimes we forget that part, right? Is that it's like, I'm just supposed to hand my kid over and then whatever happens, happens. Like, no, the school is also responsible to you as well, right?
Hmm.
And so if you remember that and you enact that, right? You may become a parent that they get irritated seeing, but you also become a parent that gets things done,
Mm. Yes.
right?
I love
And
it.
so in that, you don't have to be rude or obnoxious or any of those types of things. Persistence, though, often is important, and consistency as well, right? And
Mm.
so you're calling yourself and others higher in that regard, and that's not tied to your economic status. But I do
Right.
understand why oftentimes the idea of your the school being responsible to you also is
Right.
missed in
Hmm.
that space, because of the various ways that schools and individuals within them will
Agree.
include intimidation factors, or will tell you that
That's right.
you're not engaged because you don't show up in the ways that they want you to show up, right?
Exactly.
And so that's another part of that engagement piece around parents knowing their rights too, is that your engagement doesn't have to just look like coming to
Right.
the school. And so I have a different side of this work when I'm working with schools, is to remind them that parents are working daily in terms of their engagement with their students when they do all these other things that doesn't include them showing up, right?
Right.
So they signed the field trip paper, they sent in the money. Just because you've never seen them doesn't mean that they don't care. They make sure
Correct.
that they're at school every day. um, they're they're sending in the things that you've asked them for, right? Those are
Hmm.
all ways that they are engaged. They're picking up not only their kid but three other people's children.
Oh,
Like all of
okay.
these things are happening, right?
Hmm.
And because they didn't show up at math night,
Right.
right, during their work shift,
Right.
you want to say that they're not involved. And it's just not the case. So, beginning to get
Mm.
school representatives also to think differently about what it means for engagement, And so, I offer a lot of different recommendations, like sending projects home for parents to complete, to send back. So, you need, I don't know, paperwork stapled, or, you know what I'm saying, coloring books made, like whatever the
Okay.
thing might be.
Right.
Send it home as a project. Ask parents to sign up to send it home as a project,
I
and then let them
see.
send it back
Yes.
or
I
drop it
like
back off.
that.
That's
I like that.
engagement. And they can do that whether they work first shift, second shift, or third shift. Just
That's
get it
true.
done by the date. You see what I'm saying? So really
Hmm.
starting to think about what might be the things that we need done, that parents can feel like they contributed. There's this one school I used to work with a couple of years ago, have all these beautiful bulletin boards.
Hmm.
And I would be like, what's the point? Like, what do y'all, like, they're pretty, right? But what's the educational value of them?
Right.
And so this was one of the recommendations that I gave was I said, okay, well, in each grade level, ask a couple of parents to think about what they might put on this bulletin board that's representative of their students' work. And so then they begin to put these packets together that were like the, letters and words and like just ABC letters so that they could
Mm-hmm.
spell different stuff out. And so then different parents on rotation would set
Mm.
up these bulletin, not set them up, but would design them and then send the stuff in for it. The teacher would put it up, but they didn't have to think about what the bulletin board was going to say. They didn't have to do
Yes.
all they just send it in basically a kit for the bulletin board,
Oh, I
and
like
then the
it.
teacher puts it up, right? So that's parental engagement. That is
Right.
active being present
Mm-hmm.
for the things that need to occur. And then as we get up into the high school levels as well, is to begin to think about what are the ways in which we honor engagement that doesn't look like, again, showing up to the school building,
Right.
which is sometimes much more challenging as our kids get older because the expectation
Mm-hmm.
is that you don't show up anyway.
Right.
So these are all a part of it, but I think as we think about practical steps, those are just a few that I would offer.
I love that. And I thank you so much for that. One thing that stood out to me was a very practical thing that every educator could do. From what you said, it was implied, and that is just assume that they care. How about we do that?
Absolutely. Hmm.
Just assume
Yep.
that they care.
Yep. I have
Yeah.
assumed positive intent.
Uh-huh.
Assume
Love
positive
it.
intent and appearances, and ensure you have your own practices and
Hmm.
acknowledge them in terms of, so I'll be forthright. You sent me a couple of questions,
Hmm.
and one of them was, what advice would you give to someone looking to
That's.
improve their anti-racist, culturally competent, or inclusive practices? And my
Hmm.
sort of note on this that you just talked about was assume positive intent and ensure you have your own practices in
Hmm.
place related to these things, and acknowledge what you know and what you don't know and understand. And that being so important. So when you assume positive intent of the
Hmm.
parents, then you begin to think about what is it that I don't know or understand about this family or this person or this,
Hmm.
so that it's not just she don't care, or
Right.
whatever it might be, right? But what do I know
Hmm.
and understand about them,
Hmm.
as one of those practices that can improve how you come in to be culturally competent and inclusive.
Inclusive, powerful. Dr. Baker, this has been wonderful. Now, you gave us a resource a little earlier. You
Mhm.
provided a resource, a book, and you said in that book we could find the chapter around your rights. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of different content in this book.
Mhm.
Critical Analysis Parental Involvement in Schools Working with Families Across Sociocultural Contexts is the name of it.
Okay.
It's by Mika Williams Johnson
Hmm.
and Nicolette Rickard. And so this is a somewhat academic graduate studies type
Hmm. Hmm.
book. Definitely people that are in school systems. The other recommendation that I was going to give, and I guess send it to you, but is the one of the things that I thought about in terms of anti-racist work, especially in this,
Okay.
because as I talked about, my context for this parental rights work was all Black families.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that I find in doing this work all the time is the importance and criticality of shared language,
Shared language,
is that
yes.
we may be saying something, but we're not talking about the same thing.
Correct.
And so, in that, especially around discipline, we use the word consequences a lot, but
Mm.
we may mean punishment,
Ah, okay.
right? So, a consequence is a response to an action, whatever the action, it can be positive or negative. Punishment, though, is in
It's
order
a,
to change a behavior.
mm,
Right, like
okay.
that's kind of what you're trying to do. But related to anti-racist work, especially, one
Mm.
of the tools that I often use is racial equity tools, and it gives a glossary. That's all these different terms, and I found that when we have shared language, we do a much better job of ensuring that we're talking about the same thing at the
Thing.
same time,
True.
rather than my perspective of this thing and your perspective of this thing, and then we're missing the mark on what we understand,
Mm.
and how we operate. And the other thing that I highly value about, and I know this is the scholar in me too,
Mhm.
about shared language is that when we share language, you understand what I'm saying, in the context of that shared language, even if some other point we use this word differently,
Differently.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
so that being really, at least to me, really valuable, especially in anti-racist work,
Yeah.
because when we don't have shared language and we say something like, um, oh, I think this situation is racist. Some people hear that and think something very differently than someone else might think, just
Correct.
based on the word racist. But if we actually are sharing the same definition of racist,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't agree with the definition, you at
Mm-hmm.
least understand what the person is saying, back to that listening to understand versus just listening to respond. So that's
Yes.
what I would give as like one of my concrete anti-racist moves is pause. Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. Do we have the same language for what we're talking about? And do we have the same definition, even if we're
Mm-hmm.
using the same words?
Excellent, excellent. And particularly related to race, you would say use the resource, the racial equity tools, because that
Yeah,
is an actual website, right?
it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, for that's available to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, right. So we might not read books that start with critical analysis in the title,
Right.
but we
Exactly.
but we would go to a website, yes, that has tools for you free. You can watch on your commute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Read with your child, read with their teacher. You have blown my mind around many things today, particularly that perspective on telling the school or like renegotiating the terms, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Around discipline, acknowledging that, yeah, okay, there has been a breach of the
Mm-hmm.
community guidelines. However, I have having the positionality that I have a say as the parent, guardian, caregiver of this person in question. I have the right and should provide that information for educators so that we together can make an informed decision that can get us the results that we want. Yes,
And because that's the ultimate goal, right? Or at least it
ultimate
should be.
goal. Yes.
And that's one of the things that we have to keep coming back to, and as parents
Mm-hmm.
need to know their right and their
Mm-hmm.
advocacy. And I guess if I would, and I appreciate you coming back to that, because if I would leave
Mm-hmm.
the audience with anything,
Mm-hmm.
it would be that piece
Okay.
that you do have the authority and ability to say to the school, I understand this and I acknowledge this. Here's my counter.
There you
Right? Like,
go. I love it.
here's here's my counter, right? And so instead of 3 days at home, 3 days in ISS, right? Like, I understand that there needs to be a punishment for this,
Mm-hmm.
but the one that you're offering
It's not.
is not
Mm-hmm.
acceptable to
I love
us.
it.
And you do have the ability to do that,
Mm.
despite oftentimes schools saying you don't.
Mm.
And even if you've signed the school code, the student code of conduct, which that form usually says that you understand and have read it, it doesn't mean that you agree with all of it. And it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to come back and do what I just talked about in terms of, negotiating a different outcome. It just
There you
says you've
go.
received it
Mm-hmm.
and you've read it. And so making sure that doesn't get entered into it too. It's like, well, you agreed to this because you signed this document. I signed that I acknowledge that I saw the student code of conduct and that I understand what's in that document. That doesn't mean that I'm
Yes,
going to automatically agree to anything that you all pull from it.
that's
So
right.
that being really
Excellent.
important.
Dr. Baker, where else can we find any resources from you that help families practice and to know their rights, to uphold their own dignity, where educators can find it? Where can we find more of your work?
Yeah, so I have different pieces. I mean, I think
Mhm.
Google Scholar, and I know that that's kind of
Okay.
lofty for some people in terms of accessibility.
Okay.
And then I also have some content that you can Google. There's a couple of will enact in the academy what we call white papers, which
Okay.
are, more, they're shorter and
Mhm.
they really get at some of these things. And so those are some ways I can always be contacted
Okay.
through my website,
There you go. Okay.
equityeducatorsllc.com.
All right.
And that's another location by which you can learn about what I do and what I
What you
work on.
do?
But
Oh,
yeah,
wonderful. Well, I'm going to put it in our pitch as
okay,
a family member out here, a request for you
absolutely.
to get us a little our parents' rights up there that we could possibly download and spread
That's
the
a great idea.
word. I would love some prompts. I personally may not need prompts, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say, well, maybe you never know. Um,
Yeah.
but prompts that people can practice, yeah, because that came earlier in the conversation that came to mind when you were talking about people knowing what to say and being persistent. I thought, oh, wow, what if people were gathering and practicing it just so before you have to
Mm-hmm.
use it, before you have to use it, because that
So
helps
you're
lower
going.
your temperature. Yes. Oh, I could,
Yeah.
what you have there, listen, please.
No, I love this idea. I was just
Prepaid
taking
$5.
down some notes. I'm like,
I got $5.
no, I like it. Oh, I mean, I really like it. I hadn't thought about doing something like that. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
And that's
Thank you.
totally doable. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, listen, we have to spread the word. The
Mhm.
podcast, I just checked the other day on at least one of the platforms. I know that we have hit 10 countries. It's not even okay.
That is
The
awesome.
word is spreading. So we have to get
Yeah.
these empowering tools out into the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again,
Thank you for that.
Kimberly Baker, thank you for being you, for spending time with us. I
I appreciate
appreciate
it.
you. Yes.
Thank you for having me. And
Thank,
thank you to your audience too.
And thank you, Rooted to Thrive Tribe, and to everyone who stopped by for listening to this very end. I have one request: subscribe so you get notified for about every episode, and share this episode with just 3 people. That's right, just three
Mm.
people. Do it right now. Hit share. I'll be here the next time, waiting to welcome you back to Rooted to Thrive.